Tonight is a very exciting Shires TV episode. We're so pumped to bring it to you live from our homes because it's past the end of the workday and the factory is closed, though James is kind of in his office hanging out doing this thing. But we are so pumped to be able to talk to you a little bit about how we build instruments and show you a Shires shop tour. This is a pre-recorded tour so that we can show you everything that's going on in the factory, but I've got an amazing panel of some of my colleagues who's going to be on to discuss how we build instruments, how we design instruments, what it is that you're looking at when you come to visit Shires and you get one of these awesome shop tours. So on our panel tonight is my colleague James Monaghan, who's the general manager of S.E Shires and great trombone player. Tom Otto, who heads up our R&D and our machining department. Tuba player, former tuba player, recovering tuba player, and trombone, sorry, and then Paul, who's actually a tuba player. Thanks, guys. And Paul is leading our assembly and filing departments. So we have a great panel. I'm going to throw it over to James first to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about who he is. And we can kind of go from there, introduce our panelists, and then jump right to our tour and talking about instrument building.
Sure. So it's for those of you who don't know, I'm James Monaghan. I am the general manager here at Shires. I've been here now for just a hair over 16 years. I actually started as a trombone player, a customer, and started working here in the buffing room of all places, and I've been here ever since. One of the great things that I really like about this job is working with both the amazing craftsmen that we have here at the factory, making the instruments, but also all the really world-class artists and musicians that play our instruments. And I think it's the best of both worlds. The really good thing is I still have a somewhat active freelancing career on top of that, except not so much now because the world has ended and all of the gigs are gone. So I have my nights and weekends free for the first time in a while, which is also nice. So also on the panel here with me, two of our best people here. Tom Otto, who runs our, as Sam said, our research and development and design department here. He's also, our master machinist. If we need to make parts or make tooling or design a new instrument, Tom is the one that makes all of that happen for us. Also here, Paul Chadbourne. Paul has been here 8 years now. Is that right?
7, almost 7.
8. It feels like 8 years. Paul has been here for 8 years. He started here when he was maybe a sophomore in college.
Yeah, sophomore in college in the buffing room.
Yeah, also in the buffing room. It's where all the greatest craftsmen have started. And Paul, because he is so good and agreeable, has bounced around the factory and done just about every terrible job that we have, and he does all the good jobs as well. He's a great craftsman and a real resource for us. We're really lucky to have them. Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you to Shires and kind of what it is that you do?
Please tell us.
It's a secret. No, yeah, so I grew up as a musician, playing cello. Probably started cello in kindergarten. Started trombone and moved out to Boston in 2002 for grad school. I got my master's in trombone performance at New England Conservatory. Studied with Ron Barron, Norman Bolter. Really good foundation for becoming a professional musician. At that same time, I started kind of in the same year, I think, as James did, 2004. Really a part-time job at that point. I was just, I was freelancing a lot, and also then I got hired to draw tubes at the factory. So full of grease, drawing tubes. So that's where I got my start. I actually didn't start in the buffing room like a lot of other people did. So after that, I kind of did a lot of soldering and brazing of casings and trumpets and all kinds of different parts, and eventually moved into machining. Learned how to program, learned how to run CNC machines right at Shires, which was awesome. I got trained there. And then I kind of moved into more design work and learning how to do CAD in SolidWorks and that kind of thing. Oh, my Zoom, here we go, I'm back.
Yeah, you're good.
So yeah, what I do at work. So I run our kind of like early, kind of like, it's almost like the first half of the process of how we make an instrument, making all the parts, making sure we have everything on hand for all of our craftsmen and assemblers and such. And then, like James said, we need to have a new instrument designed or new tooling or jigs or something. I work on that. So
You make it sound so easy.
doing it for a while.
Yeah, awesome.
So I'll answer any other questions about later on about design or anything or upcoming projects.
Sure.
Paul?
Hi, so I'm Paul Chadbourne. I studied tuba performance down at Rhode Island College with Tom Gregory, who's a former Navy guy, worked for Boozy and Hawks. While I was there, I got talking with Joe Foley, who's a Boston area freelance artist, about after I had completed an apprenticeship at a local music shop in Rhode Island. And I actually started doing some minor repairs actually in the parking lot at Rick, which probably also wasn't legal.
Parking lot, what?
But yeah, so after that, and then I get talking with Joe, who Joe also comes into the shop when we're able to have people in the shop pretty frequently to try trumpets, give us input on new stuff that we're trying. And he told me that he was actually going to be coming in to meet with James and Steve to try trumpets. So he dragged me along, introduced me to James, and then I was very shortly after thrown in the buffing room.
Nice.
In all fairness, Joe Foley bullied me into hiring you, which, as it turns out, was a good thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so I, like James said, I kind of, anytime there's been an open position, I usually get asked if I want to try it. I usually do it for maybe 6 months, and then somebody else leaves or moves on to another job, and I take over that job. Which has been great because then I've been able to learn a ton of different things. The only thing on the trombone side of things I haven't done is bell spinning, which is good. So if anybody needs to take a day off, I'm their guy.
Nice.
At this point now, I'm not really building as much anymore. I'm managing both the assembly team and now the finaling team as well, making sure everything gets built, everything gets the final touches before they go into our play test situation. Yeah.
Yeah, so when Paul doesn't have a part, he comes yells at me like, "Where's the part?"
And I just get to yell at everybody.
Yeah, when Johnny trombone player doesn't have his trombone, you come yell at us.
This is how it works. No, this is totally awesome. And I do just want to say really quickly, I just posted a little comment, but we are going to be running this awesome shop tour video that James took. If you do have questions about horn building, R&D, careers in this side of the industry, anything, please pop them in the comments. We're going to take little breaks in between the videos so that we can get to some questions. So feel free, put them in that little chat box and I will keep an eye on it and try to work them in throughout our conversation. But without further ado, James Monaghan, if you want to queue up your feature presentation.
I do.
And I will say we would have loved to do this live, but being that ShiresTV is usually 8 p.m. on Thursday evenings, a lot of our team members get in like pretty early in the morning. So 8 p.m. is a very late day and evening at the shop. So this was the best way for us to be able to show you a full picture of everything that's happening. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. So it'll be nice to be able to share that with you guys.
All right, let's see, make sure this works. And here it comes. All right, so if you don't already know, Shires has somewhat recently, in 2018, we moved into a new facility in Holliston, Massachusetts. This is our facility here. This is the factory in Holliston. It's a 12,000 square foot building on 3 acres of land. This is where we have all of our business and sales offices, our world-class showroom where customers can come from all over the world and try the instruments in person. And also our, most of the factory is set up for the manufacturing space. It's a significantly nicer place than where we were at the beginning of our history. And it's been a really nice place for us. This is our showroom. On display, we've got a whole bunch of trombone components, all the different various modular bells that we make, hand slides, valve sections, trumpets we bring out for specific customers. This window's cool, see out into the trees. We've got a big rock in the thing. It's very nice. So that's our showroom. That's where you're going to come if you're going to try an instrument. Tom, start talking about the machine shop.
All right. Hey, here we are in the machine shop. We have 5 different CNC machines in our machine shop and some manual mills as well. Starting off here, as you can see, we basically make everything in our machine shop that we need as far as machine parts go. We're actually on this machine. It's a small CNC lathe. We're machining our thumb paddles out of tiger wood. The tiger wood is sourced from Costa Rica, a sustainable operation down there. And you can see the cool little finish we get from being able to machine these with a CNC lathe. Here's a little bit view of our factory as we come in. This is our mill. This is our only CNC mill. It's a little different than a lathe because the tooling is actually spinning and doing the profiling of the part instead of the part spinning. And that's our trumpet casing there. Moving on, if you were kind of to visit us on this day, we were doing a lot of valve work. This is another CNC lathe that we do a lot of our finish operations and a lot of our parts. Here is our tenor traditional rotor. Same rotor that's in the Joel S.E trombone, really popular tenor rotor. At this point, all those ports have kind of been machined in the mill, and they're over this machine to get the final turn of the spin, 2 different spindles, the front and the back spindle on the body. As you can see here. So obviously, like I said, we make all of our parts in the factory, and that gives us a lot of flexibility to run things whenever we want. Keep our quality control really high. We're not relying on different manufacturing operations or factories in any other part of the world for at least our machine parts. This is a view of our stock rack, and you can see aluminum, brass, bronze, Monel, steel, nickel. I think that's basically it. All kinds of metals to supply the shop. Across from Ryan there, who's running our rotors, we're actually running our Truebar rotors, which are made out of bronze. First op of these doesn't really look like a Truebar rotor at this point. There are many different operations after this, from machining to brazing, back to machining, back to brazing, back to machining. So that's kind of cool. There's James. That's kind of our first op part before the holes are put in and before they're brazed. So like I said, a lot of our machine parts are made in-house. most of them, except for like a few little screws that we just get supplied to us. But all of our key components are made in-house. And what we've done in the last number of years is that we've moved a lot of our bent parts, crooks, like these right here, to our Shires factory in Beijing. And that's really actually pushed the quality up significantly. The infrastructure they have there is amazing. We get parts from them that are already like perfect, they're buffed, they're ready to go. It helps us focus on actually doing what we need to do, assembling instruments of high quality. Here are a bunch of bins with parts in them. And those, kind of this past year, we've implemented something called an ERP system that's allowed us to keep really tight control of every single part we have, know how many we have on hand at all times. So we're not like making too many of one part or too few of another. We can plan out like a quarter ahead of the year and make sure Paul, craftsman, had everything they need. So I just kind of want to show you something quick. We were making those tenor rotors. This is a finished one. You can see it. Let me see here. Let's see the ports. It's been final machined. There are these nice reliefs on the front and back. It's really light. There we go. And that ends up doing is fitting into our trombone rotor casing before it's assembled. And once they're lapped in, drops in, spins nicely. You can almost see it. See it as a spin? Maybe not. So there's a lot we can do. That was a crash course. Try to get as much information as possible in that little time, but
if you have questions about the machining department specifically, you can totally pop them in the comments and we'll get to those at the end of the video. But we have a lot more to show you too. We just want to make sure that we cover everything or as much of it as we can. So super.
Start with Paul next.
Yeah, all right, Paul.
Is it me next or is it Bell's
No,
next?
it may actually be Bell's next. All right, let me pull this up.
You.
All right.
We know how to build instruments really well. The whole Zoom tech thing is maybe questionable.
There we go. Look at this. This looks nice. So one of the highlights for any of our shop tours is obviously the bell department and the way that we make bells. All of our bells are hand formed, hand brazed, hand hammered, and hand spun out of sheet brass. You can see the coils of brass right here. We use, I think it's like 7 different alloys of material in yellow brass, gold brass, red brass, German brass, sterling silver. It's 5, so 5, yeah, 5 different materials of brass, 7 different weights, I think is what it is. So a lot of variety there. As I said, all of our bells are hand formed and brazed. This is Rodrigo, our master bell maker, right now preparing a bell stem to be brazed. You can see a kind of an old-fashioned, old-world overlapping seam with tabs that he's hammering down there. A lot of makers have switched to using a butt-seamed welded bell, which is cosmetically maybe a little more perfect. It gives you a very uniform joint and an almost invisible seam. In our experiments, what we found is when you do it that way, you lose a little bit of the character in the sound. And so we've decided to retain this sort of older technique because it gives the bells in particular a little bit more character, a little more that thing in the sound that it's hard to describe, but it's worth doing. One of the really interesting things about this process is Rodrigo makes it look really easy. This is actually very difficult. Anybody that's tried to do this for the first time will almost invariably burn a giant hole straight through the bell. the melting point of this brass wire that he's melting into or this silver wire into the joint here is only this much less than the melting point of the brass itself. So gauging the heat as precisely as he does, you know, and as consistently as he does, takes years of experience. And we're really lucky to have someone that is as good as Rodrigo is doing this. Throw it in the bin. After the bells are brazed, we run it through our seam roller, which actually takes that overlapping seam and irons it out flat. This seam roller is a machine that we've had for as long as Shires has been around. It's over 100 years old. It was so old that the cast iron supporting structure that holds the whole top of that thing ended up cracking and breaking a couple years ago. Tom did a great job re-engineering it with steel I-beams, and we basically had to rebuild the whole top of that thing to make it structurally sound again. It's one of those. Yeah, it's a fun project. It's one of those instances where the tooling to make brass instruments doesn't really exist except when you make it yourself. As I said, our bells are hand hammered. Now, we do have a machine that operates the hammer for us, but Rodrigo is still manipulating this bell by hand. And, you know, what would take a week with a hammer and his arm can take a matter of, you know, half an hour now, which makes it much more efficient. Doesn't make it any easier, and it doesn't make it any more pleasant.
Or quieter.
Yeah.
It's a very loud, very demanding process, and it's really easy to fold the bell on top of itself and wreck everything that you've done beforehand. That hand hammering is one of the things that gives the bells their characteristic sound, instead of just like pushing them out into a form or something. The hand hammering adds a lot of complexity into the way the metal's distributed and hardens it in a way that's hard to replicate with a machine or an automatic process. Again, it gives it that nice character. Bells are, of course, always hand spun. Rodrigo here spinning what looks like it to be a bass trombone bell. This is a two-piece bell. Our trumpets are all one-piece bells. The bell is made out of a single sheet of brass. Trombone bells are, I don't know, 90, 85% of the bells that we make are two-piece bells, where the stem and the flare are made independently. You can see that shiny area right in the middle of the bell. That's where Rodrigo's actually used the spinning tool there to iron out that overlapping seam to make it flat. He's then pushed the bell onto the mandrel that it's on. It's on a hardened steel mandrel that is the exact shape of the bell. And what he's doing is, as the bell is spinning, ironing it down onto that mandrel. It work hardens the metal, and it also forms it to the exact shape that we want. Once that's done, you can see this process he's doing now. This is just a little bit of surface finishing on the outside of the bell, both to prepare it for the first round of sanding and buffing to make it shiny, but it's also gonna gradually thin out the bell in a way that we are very specific about, and we do for different models of bells. Here's kind of a new process. We used to do this by hand. Now we've got a really slick digital readout that measures exactly where this cutting tool is to cut the diameter of the bell. This is another one of those improvements that Tom has done for us over the last few years, improving the sort of process in which we make the instruments, making things that can be made more consistent, and allowing us to
safer too.
A lot safer. It allows us to really focus on using our hands to make the things where the hands make the difference and make the sound well, you know, improve the sound. Where things can be made safer or more efficient, we're going to do that as well. It's kind of the perfect blend of that old world craftsmanship of hitting things with hammers, and then using science and math to make instruments correctly from the beginning. Here you can see Rodrigo's installing the bead wire on this particular bell. Every bell that we make has a wire that's actually wrapped up inside the edge of the bell. That wire provides structural support. Also, the material, the gauge, and the way that the wire is actually spun into the bell has a profound effect on the way the instruments play. Everything that we do makes a difference in how horns play. Some of our bells, that bell, the edge of the bell is just wrapped around and it's left the way it is. Other bells that we make have a soldered in bead, where we actually take that joint and solder it all around. In about 2 seconds, you're going to see Woody doing that. I got ahead of myself. Look at that bell. That looks great. Rodrigo's smiling under the mask. You can't ever see it. This is Woody.
Or without a mask.
Yeah. Woody's one of our newer craftsmen here. He's been here less than a year. Fantastic craftsman. He's been a great addition to our team. He's been working with Rodrigo for a while, getting beat up and learning how to make belts. So right now you can see him knocking flux bottles over and soldering the bead wire here into the bell. This is one of those soldered in bells. Once that's all done, the bells go into our buffing and polishing team. Here, Colin is just doing the first round of sanding on the inside of the bell flares. It's all done by hand. We want to make sure that we prepare the surface properly for polishing so that we can polish it to a perfect mirror finish without removing too much material. So he's got a very specific sort of pattern and process that he uses. And he's also very good, visual inspection as well. Finished bells ready for engraving. You can see 3 of our heaviest hitter tenor trombone artists represented there. Colin Williams, Joe Alessi, and Ralph Sauer. We have signature models for all 3 of those artists. Some of our best-selling instruments and really remarkable trombones. The engraving machine here, you can see, cuts our maker's mark into every bell. It's a diamond-tipped engraving stylus run by a computer from the early 90s. It still has a serial port and runs Windows XP. It's great. Takes about 23 minutes to engrave a bell start to finish. We do our standard maker's mark, but we also can do custom engraving, different patterns. We've done some interesting things like we'll put someone's name on a bell. We've changed the entire pattern of the flowers from our standard, vintage floral engraving to we've done hops for beer enthusiasts. I did
And
that.
also you'll see once we get to the buffing that we also did a very cool engraving for one of our dealers in Japan, Sonata, with Joy Brat.
Yep. We did a special 25th edition for Kazuhiro Sonata, who I think is watching actually.
Yeah.
Turned out great. And it's one of the things that I'm most proud of is having actually designed this new pattern. I spent a lot of time teaching myself how to use Illustrator and actually do a really nice rendition of cherry blossoms and a new maker's mark on there. So that's our bell department. That's how we make the bells. That's the voice of the instruments. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into a trombone than just a bell. We've got to build the rest of it. I think
Before we get there, actually, let me jump in with a couple questions that people had been asking during this. Tom, this one's for you for machining department. Amy wants to know, like, how many are in the machining department and what types of machines? So for our, how many like machines, mills, lathes, all that kind of stuff, and then like what are our big opening machines that we use?
Well, we have 4 CNC lathes. We have 2 guys operating both, basically 2 operators in the machine shop. So a lot of stuff runs through the 2 of these major lathes first, and then things get run into a CNC mill. 2 of them are Haas mills, and another one's the Cincinnati Millicron mill. I mean, a lathe. And we have 3 other Haas machines. And we're kind of looking into hopefully buying a big fancy new machine that's going to do everything in one, like this rotor I was talking about before. It'll make it all in one step, and we won't have to run it through all kinds of different machines. And even though our quality is awesome now, it's going to even like shoot through the roof once we're able to do something like that. So did that answer the question? I couldn't.
No, totally. I think so. I hope so for Amy. But no, I think that's great. It gives a little bit more of an idea. Our good buddy and artist and friend Wes Lebo was asking a couple questions, and I might save some of them or one part of it towards the end. But one of his questions was, do you make X number of parts and then assemble on order, or do you keep an inventory of parts and finished items to pull from? So like, Tom, how do you manage the parts portion?
Yeah, so part of my role is like the parts manager. And so we don't make parts to order. We make Basically, with this new ERP system, we can always have an idea of how many parts we have on hand. So we make, usually I strive to be a month ahead, hopefully, of the assembly department, and maybe keep like 3 months of parts on hand at one time. Depending, like some things we don't make that many of, like parts for like a piccolo trumpet, for instance. We'll make like a year's worth of parts at one time, for instance.
Makes sense.
Like different setups, and like when you're doing a setup on a machine, it takes a while. So you don't want to just make 5 parts when it takes you an hour to set the machine up.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, one of the things that we're going to lead into next with this next bit of the video is we are a maker of custom instruments, and as such, we've set up our factory in such a way that we're able to make every instrument sort of to order, like a short order cook at a diner. We're not making a batch of 100 Joe Alessi models at one time. We are going to make exactly which instruments we have orders for coming up in our production schedule immediately. You'll see when we're actually looking at the instruments being made, you won't see a lot of the same instrument left, order after each other. You'll see one of this, one of that, 2 of those, 1 of these. We're set up in a way that allows us to be incredibly flexible, incredibly responsive to what our customer demands are. It makes us a lot more efficient. It makes the factory run leaner, and also helps us control quality as well. When you're doing smaller batches like that, if something goes wrong and there is an issue with quality, we discover it very quickly, and we can very quickly address it and not have hundreds of instruments with the same defect. We'll have one instrument with a defect, we'll fix it, and the next one won't have it. And that's one of the things that we've done here that's kind of specific to the custom manufacturing part of our business.
Touche. Well said. So you're gonna queue up your video now for the next saga.
Let's do it.
Nice.
So here we'll actually see start getting into the brazing process. This is a different type of brazing than what Rodrigo was doing on the bells. This is a high temp braze, and like I'm doing myself with actually a Joseph Alessi model F bridge. It's a high temp braze, so it's a lot more structurally sound than just normal solder. One of the other things that we talked about too is Tom geniusly designed these plates that you'll see Nick Martino using, where not only we can cut each of our bent parts efficiently and quickly, because we can cut more than one at a time, they're also incredibly safe. Because safety is obviously one of our top priorities, in addition to getting stuff done quickly, efficiently. And then moving on, each of our valves, the axial valve in particular, what you see here, they're each machined to a very tight tolerance. The axials in particular, each top plate is machined to the specific valve and casing. So one top plate will not work with another valve. It's a very, very tedious, very in-depth process, but it's definitely what helps our valves kind of stand out. And you'll see in those jars, on Kyle's bench, we use various different kinds of lapping paste and compounds, which are similar to like a liquid sandpaper, in various grits from very coarse to super fine. After that, if they don't have an order, they'll get put aside. But then, like James was saying, these are some of our trombone kits. You'll see some tenor axials, some rotors. Basically, each both trombones and trumpets go through this same kind of kit process where you basically get almost like a Lego set of all the parts you're going to need. And that's kind of up to the craftsman from there to kind of put it together. One of the things we pride ourselves on is building stuff under 0 to no tension. So there's no clamps, there's no straps. It really helps the horn resonate a lot more. In addition to that, all of our receivers and our hand slides are all hand stamped, which really helps us stand out and really highlights the hands-on approach that we have to everything. You can see here with Nick Martino and Dave Paul, 2 of our valve section builders, using the 2 of the tenor fixtures that we have that help set the spacing to make it so we can have a modular system and also make it efficiently and repeatable. Here you can actually see my wife making some of our tuning slide legs. The next process is really interesting. We actually hand bend all of our main tuning slide crooks still in-house, along with our trumpet bells, but in particular our main tuning slide crooks. They're actually kept at about between -60 and -70 degrees Fahrenheit in this freezer. And then what you can see Josh is doing, he's barking off the taper tube, depending on what type of crook it's going to be, to make sure that the correct taper is being used for that crook. And then it's actually hand bent around different dies and bending jigs to get the correct shape. After that, it'll get put into separate dies, and then either ball bearings or washers will get pulled through it, and that'll blow figuratively speaking, blow the crook out to the correct bore size and eliminate all ripples and imperfections. Here, Kevin is building some of our main tuning slides, again, with some of our standard fixtures to help with the whole modular system. Kevin's also our main hand slide builder, where right now he's building some of the pre-assemblies for the slides that'll soon get turned into slides after that. Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks.
Good job, Paul. Sam, you're unmuted. Unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Well, could you talk really quickly about, you were talking about how we don't build with tension, we don't build with straps and stuff. How do we do it then? Like for everybody at home, see it kind of briefly, but what does that process look like?
Yeah. So basically our fixtures, as you can saw, they're very, very minimal. They're basically just 2 posts to set the spacing of both of the brace tubes that are going to attach to the bell. And then we have basically a dummy tuning slide that we put on the other end. And then we have a bar to set the angle of perfect. Thank you. And then we have a bar that goes in the end of the receiver to the end of the fixture to set the angle of the receiver coming off. And other than that, everything's built by eye. It takes a lot of practice, a very good eye to be able to see what's parallel, make sure that stuff's not sitting at funny angles.
Can one of you speak to the, building things to parallel, but also allowing them to cool sufficiently? So like in terms of,
so we never quench or spray stuff off. That's a big no-no around the shop. Because by doing that, it's actually causing the brass to contract faster than it would have normally if you just let it naturally cool, which would then cause it to sit where it doesn't want to sit and cause it to be under tension, because then it's like if you jump in a freezing cold pool, like you're going to tense up. So it's the same sort of process.
Weaker joint too, a lot of times,
Yeah.
like by quenching it too.
Yeah.
The other neat thing, and whoever wants to touch on this, maybe James or maybe Tom, since you're the one that actually like implemented it, but we're using the same fixtures, the same measurements, both here at our workshop in Massachusetts and also at our workshop in China, to make sure that we're totally compatible with Q series to customs. So like, what was that process like, and how important was that when we were setting that standard?
It was very important. It's one of the things that has been, you know, a challenge for us in the beginning, but it's been a very worthwhile project. It's important for us as our custom factory here in Holliston that every instrument that we make is perfectly interchangeable. And you know, our long-standing Shires customers may remember a time when tuning slides didn't always fit perfectly, and the bells were a little inconsistent. The last several years, we've kind of had a very deliberate process of improving and standardizing a lot of these older fixtures that we started the company with, and engineering them to be more robust, more consistent, and also repeatable. We no longer have just one guy building every valve section anymore. You know, we're a bigger company, and we need to have multiple people building valve sections. We have, you know, sometimes two Nicholases building valve sections. Sometimes we have a Nick and a David. Sometimes a Nick David. Right now, we've got 3 different people building trombone valve sections because our back order on trombones is gotten bigger than we want, and we have people that are trained to do it. So we've actually added a couple of additional fixtures for our own factory here in the last week and a half, thanks to Tom. It's also really important that our factories in China that are making the Shires Q series instruments, those also have to be made exactly to our standards and have to be perfectly interchangeable. So engineering the fixtures and the process in such a way that it can be consistent and duplicatable on both ends of the planet or on benches that are right next to each other here in Holliston is incredibly important to us. And it's one of the things that we've spent a lot of time and energy in improving with the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, man. Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Hard to improve on that.
Yeah, you nailed it. So you have another part of the video?
Of course, there's always more until there isn't. So we've just finished building everything. It's turned out perfectly. Now, once things are built, we've got to make it look perfect, and that's where we jump into our buffing room here. You'll see, you know, a whole cart full of hand slides that are queued up and waiting to be buffed. Finished assembled trumpets as well. All have to be polished by hand. Those valve sections we were talking about. We queue everything up in the buffing room. You'll see these tags that have barcodes on them. This is how we track product as it moves through the factory. We have a very specific production schedule of orders that we have to fulfill. And we also know exactly which instruments are in production and which instruments are going to which customers. It allows us to be very lean and efficient. And also, this is a lot choppier than I thought it should be. I'm going to play around with this a little bit, but it allows us to be really efficient and make the instruments, you know, in the right order and not have a lot of extra stuff moving on. One of the things you'll see in this video that's a huge improvement to us, and as someone who started in the buffing room 100 years ago, it's been a really great addition to our factory, and that's our new dust collection system. And I would love it if Tom would talk about our dust collection system while I make the video.
Dorkiest thing to talk about.
Oh, I love it. I'm so proud of this thing.
Dust collection. Yeah, man.
There we go.
Betcha.
Yeah, it was fun too. So we basically use our existing dust cyclone outside, and
Which for people that don't know, that's basically just a gigantic vacuum.
vacuum.
That's
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
building.
Like a Dyson.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks it into these huge bags called a bag house. But so I got to dive into learning all about CFM and velocity and how big the ducting had to be, and got to design some pretty cool blast gates. I don't know if that's going to be on here or not. That are pneumatically powered with switches, so you can kind of see it. But anyway, it's a lot cleaner now.
And not just that, it improves our quality as well too. I mean, we're able to contain more stuff, and it's a much more dedicated space, which is fantastic too.
There we go. Yeah, you can see a little bit. Yeah, I mean, obviously, then now we're not having dust particles and cloth float through the shop as much as it was before.
Mhm.
And again, a lot safer too, because it's a lot less particulates that are potentially being breathed in.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Yep. So back to the actual process now. What you're seeing here is our buffing team. The very beginning, you saw Matt doing some rough polishing on some brazed parts before they're assembled. Jason there was buffing a valve section. Marcio here is color buffing one of these custom instruments that we've made for Kazuhiro. This is their 25th anniversary with the cherry blossom engraving. Marcio did a great job holding it up for the camera.
Nice.
And so the mirror polish that makes the instruments as cool as they are is accomplished by buffing and polishing. The lacquer that we apply is just a clear coat. It doesn't actually make the instrument shinier. It just protects the finish that has actually been applied to the horns. So you can see here, these are raw brass bells and tuning slides and valve sections that have just come out of buffing, waiting to be lacquered here. You'll see one of the really big improvements that we've made to our facility here is our new lacquer booth and oven. This is these giant booths here. We used to lacquer in something that was a little more like a closet. Since we moved into the new factory, we've actually got a purpose-built lacquer booth that's incredibly efficient. It's also very safe and is a much better environment for spraying lacquer. Here you can see Corey, our lacquer specialist, preparing to shoot a batch of lacquer for us. It's you can see here bells kind of queued up, ready to shoot a batch. The lacquer is applied by hand. It's sprayed on just kind of like you would spray a car. With a spray gun. We use a nitrocellulose lacquer that is it's a clear coat, and we apply it somewhat on the thin side. We found when you apply too much lacquer, too many coats, or too heavy, it really starts to negatively affect the way the instruments play. So we try to put on as little lacquer as we can to protect the instrument until it gets into your hands and you start playing it every day. It's a temporary finish, like any lacquer, but it just kind of helps preserve the instrument as it leaves our factory.
Corey can come out of there too. We let him out maybe twice a day.
15 minutes.
Maybe 3 times.
Nice.
Yeah.
I hope he's watching.
I hope he is. Here's that's custom horn that we're making for Sonata.
Nice.
I kind of just followed it around the factory. It was great. But you can see, like, this is a process that takes some time and takes a lot of skill because you're painting with invisible paint, which you can't see. So you have to rely on repeating a specific pattern of spray and just technique and experience to know that you've covered the entire instrument adequately and evenly without overspraying and piling on a bunch of extra lacquer and causing drips and sags. We also keep it very, very clean to help cut down on inclusions in the lacquer, like lint or dust particles and things like that. The lacquer booth itself is ventilated. You saw those filters in the door, and basically what it's doing is pulling air from the factory through the booth and then out through another set of filters to filter out the overspray from the lacquer, and then exhaust the rest of the fumes up and out into the atmosphere. It's entirely safe, and it's not a toxic chemical. It's not a problem for the environment. We are very careful here to adhere to all of the environmental standards for disposing of hazardous materials and waste. You'll see in the next little bit of our filing team a lot of the aqueous ultrasonic cleaners that we use. And we have a closed water system there that captures and disposes of all that wastewater properly and safely. You've heard us mention this a few times. Health and safety for our craftsmen is as important as efficiency and quality to us. We have to make the best instruments with the best craftsmen, and we have to keep them safe and healthy to do that. And it's one of the things that we take a lot of pride in. Our director of safety, Chuck Shepard, has done an amazing job of kind of leading our safety initiative here at Shires. Chuck is one of the founding members of Shires. He was with Steve Shires in his basement, starting the company back in '95. And we've managed to lock him away in his office and keep him here mostly voluntarily since then. Any questions so far that we want to hop on? Or
I think if you want to keep going, I do have some other questions that people have been writing in, but we'll get to those probably towards the end of the video.
Yeah, let's get through the end. Paul, let's take us home.
Yeah. So like James said, we're now heading back into the assembly room after we completed the lacquer process. You can see when we first started some of the cleaning tanks that we have. So when you come in to the left, this is the assembly side of the room, final assembly. Basically, after everything gets lacquered, it gets brought over to our craftsmen where they do the final fitting of the valves, the slides, and they make sure everything's up to our quality standards. Make sure everything's moving freely. Yeah, and then this is our staging area for our trumpets after Daniel's done finaling them, where they wait for Kenny to play test. Here you'll see our Summon honing machine, which is actually designed for honing engine blocks, which is actually what that fixture is to the right of the base. But like other things that we use, it has other purposes. What Daniel's doing right now was doing, he was honing our pistons down to a specific size. Here you'll see Sean, who's a fantastic trumpet player, but is actually doing the final assembly of our hand slides. What he's doing here is a process we call tickling the slides. Very technical term. Basically, he's just polishing the inside of the tubes. Because if that wasn't done, then you'd have a really scratchy, really not great feeling slide. And here we see Josh again. Josh is one of the newest members to our filing team. He's part of the Q series quality control side of it. So basically what they do is they get stuff in from the Eastman headquarters in Pomona. They get them off the truck, take them out of the case, go through everything, make sure it's really up to our standard. Clean everything, make sure valves are moving, slides are moving. And here's some of our aqueous cleaning tanks. Basically what that means, before we used to use a particular chemical to degrease and clean stuff, which we found there was actually safer ways to do stuff, which is what we're using now. So it's all water-based. Again, very safe to dispose of. Yeah.
And that's basically the filing process.
Yep.
once the horns are done, they're queued up, and the final step of making any custom Shires trombone or Q series charge trombone is inspection, playtesting, and shipping.
Or trumpet.
So we play or trumpet, or eventually euphoniums, and who knows what else. But yeah, every instrument is assembled. All these modular components for trombones come together at the very end and are assembled into a complete order and then play tested under normal circumstances when we're not in the worldwide pandemic. We have a variety of people here that are professional instrument players that will play test the instruments. We're doing a very limited play testing right now, just to keep everyone isolated and safe. We're doing a lot more mechanical inspection to make sure everything's good. A lot less of actually putting our faces on instruments and blowing things into them. But we're hoping to get back into more of our normal playtesting routine as soon as is reasonably safe for everyone. Here you can see a whole bunch of trombones that are all queued up, ready to go. Like I said, everything is made to order, and we see a lot of trombones. They all look very similar. Most of these are going to entirely different places. That one's going to Australia. This one that one went fast. A whole bunch of these are going to music and arts, kind of all over the country, which will be nice. So it's the way that we're able to kind of keep track of everything and get it out in the most efficient way possible to the right people. So that was the shop tour. We finished by looking at the sign and the kind of surrounding hills of Holliston. So for those of you not familiar with the immediate area, Holliston's about 45 minutes outside of Boston, sort of southwest a little bit of Boston. It's a nice, quiet little industrial park, and it's been a really nice home for us. So that's the shop.
So now that we finished the shop tour officially, got a slew of questions for you guys, if that's okay. One really important one that I think we would love to talk about is a little bit more about our
Here you can also see we not only are we safe, but we also like to have fun.
Oh gosh.
We like to have a nice camaraderie and morale at the shop. So joking around is definitely appreciated as long as we're getting it, obviously.
And erase that from your memory.
Nope.
But the other thing that we should say before I start getting some of these questions is that almost every single person at the factory plays an instrument, and most people play a brass instrument. It's probably 8, 9 out of 10 people at the factory are musicians, and I think that totally shows in the commitment and the dedication and the quality and the passion for what we do, because it's really fun. Like Paul can attest to this, like sitting in a section of an orchestra looking down the line at somebody who's playing on the Shires and like, hey man, what's that serial number? Oh yeah, I built your horn. Like, it's a pretty cool thing.
It's very cool.
Have some ownership over that, and for everybody who's a member of our team, it's a very strong point of pride and passion. For me, I came to the company because I fell in love with our trumpets and just wanted to be involved with something that I thought was just so incredible. And for a lot of us, you get to know the instruments, and then you get to know the people, and then you get to know the process, and the whole thing just kind of comes together, and it's a really nice way to spend a good part of your life, really. But that being said, euphoniums, let's talk about euphoniums for a total segue. William has had a great question. Can you please talk a little bit about euphonium construction at whichever workshop we're doing it in? And maybe, James, you can give just a little bit of info about how we designed our Q-Series euphoniums, what that building process is like, and then a little bit about what's special about them. I don't know.
Sure. Euphonium, obviously an entirely new instrument for Shires. It's not one of the trumpets or trombones that we've made for the most majority of our history. It's kind of a natural instrument for us to branch out into. I was a euphonium double major in college, bass trombone and euphonium. I played a lot of euphonium. I started playing euphonium as a double instrument in high school when I broke my wrist on a skateboard, and couldn't play trombone for a while. So I picked up euphonium and figured out the fingerings pretty quickly, and got really good at it. Anyway, so euphonium was kind of a natural thing that I personally was interested in exploring, and we had now this incredible resource in joining the Eastman family, of having the ability to make a Q series instrument, as sort of our initial entry into this class of instrument. So we started with, where you would start any project like this, talking to the real artists that are going to be, playing the instrument professionally, and really in our immediate area, the best players of euphoniums are in the military bands in DC. So we had an opportunity to work with some great musicians from
Diaz and Matt Van Emmerich out in Australia, and then our own team member Chuck Kerrigan is a fantastic low brass tuba player, and he's our low brass product manager for Eastman. So having his input, some really great players and people.
Yeah, and people that have been, incredibly nice to work with, just because they're amazing human beings and really remarkable musicians. If you see some of these videos that Matt Van Emmerich or Hiram Diaz are posting playing these Shires instruments, they make me feel bad about myself as a trombone player. And I think if you watch them and you're a brass player, you'll feel bad about yourself too. Unless you are Hiram Diaz, in which case you feel great because you can play it very well. Anyway, so we started with amassing the best players that we possibly could to give us the initial feedback and give us a direction. We started with an instrument that was similar to what we envisioned the ultimate Shires euphonium would become. We start with that. We make some prototypes. Those prototypes were made by Eastman at our facilities in China, because they have the ability to do really fast tool and die making, and they have a factory that makes tool and dies for both all of Eastman and now all of us, a lot of our tool and dies as well. They do a really fantastic job, and it's very quick, much faster than we can do ourselves, on top of trying to make the instruments that we make here. So we make some prototypes. We do a lot of play testing. Some of the things were great. Some of the things, intonation in particular on the euphonium, was not stellar on the first round. So we did a lot of analysis on exactly what harmonics we wanted to correct. We did some experimentation with bore sizes and changing tapers of the tube to bring some of the partials in better alignment. A lot of this was done either by trial and error, but also by sort of like some more scientific analytical analysis, where we've taken the three-dimensional drawings that we had created of the instrument and also looked at some other examples of other instruments that had different intonation tendencies, and looked at those measurements in 3 dimensions, and were able to make some very interesting comparisons and discover very specifically where changes in taper can actually adjust intonation. And the final product is an instrument that plays more in tune than any euphonium that I've ever experienced. And as a trombone player who's used to having a slidey, tuning slide in my hand, I really like to have a euphonium that plays in tune. It's kind of nice. And I think real euphonium players will appreciate it eventually as well too. So superior intonation and response, they're built beautifully. The valve fitting and action on these things is superior. And also it has the thing in the sound that Shires instruments have: clarity, ease of playing, quick response, really deep, kind of broad, deep, interesting sound with a lot of character, really like clearly defined core, a lot of overtones and shimmer to the sound, really flexible. It's all the things that makes a Shires sound like a Shires. The euphonium has that same character in the voice, and it's a project I've been really proud of. Both my own selfish personal involvement, but also the way that the entire organization on across both sides of the planet have worked together really closely and really effectively, between, like I said, the experiments I did, the analysis and tooling and stuff that happened by my colleague Lee Stone in China, also the input from Chuck Kerrigan and Hiram and Matt and the players here, in town as well, and like everybody here, Tom and Paul helped tremendously on this thing as well too. So like it's
Yeah.
like anything that we do, it's going to be better when it's a well organized group effort, and it's one of the things I'm really proud of.
Yay. As a quick little follow-up, Bobby was wondering, any chance there's an E-flat tenor horn, aka alto, in the works? And I will just say, we have the most incredible list of R&D projects that James and I and our colleague Ryan Richmond put together like 4 years ago or something. It's maybe like 3 pages long and goes like taking us through the next 10, 15, 20 years. So like almost anything that you could think of would be on that list. It's just a matter of when we get to some stuff.
And that tenor horn is above the trombonium. I will tell you that.
Yeah. But we do try to come out with new things every year. So we'll be making some announcements about some stuff that's going to be coming out in 2021. But yeah, every year we keep expanding the catalog for both Q series and custom series instruments. We want to have as comprehensive of a brass line. We are custom brass instruments. We are not just trombone. We're trying to do everything in that same like Shires voice that James is talking about. So it might not be a project that's immediately on our docket, but we are always open to seeing what players are looking for. That's pretty much what drives our decision to come out with any new instrument. And euphonium is something that people have always wanted from Shires, and it, like Jim's saying, it definitely makes sense in terms of the players and where we kind of sit in the industry. I mean, it's been a really welcome addition. Yes, contrabass trombone is on that list, and that's way sooner on the docket. I will say we were hopeful to actually start working on that this year. COVID will postpone some of that R&D stuff for some of the more complicated stuff, but it is still on the docket. We've had many R&D meetings, even in the first couple months of the year, about it. I won't go too much into it, but our goal is to definitely have a Q series option for the Contra and then a custom as well. So you'll have a really killer, affordable Q series Contra that so many people can actually afford. It's still, everything is expensive, and I totally understand that. But compared to $15,000, it's a very big difference. So that will be a very fun project. And yeah, Mike Baker, we are working on a few other fun trumpets and trumpet family items. So that will be coming out soon too. But what was I going to say? I was going to say something else. I just get so excited to talk shop about all this stuff. Let me see. I did pull out a couple questions that I wanted to get to. So Wes was wondering, this is a very popular question. What is the average time that it takes to build an instrument from start to finish? And then he was kind of getting more into like, do you build them to order, which we've kind of addressed. But yeah, what does it look like in terms of building instruments, Jimbo?
Right now, I did a little bit of napkin math right before the call. We've got between 30 to 50 man hours into every instrument here at the factory, and that's it's about that. Here we're making just about 800 trombones a year, about 200 trumpets, and then the Q series on top of that is a little even higher volume than that.
Nice, perfect. And then he had another question, and maybe I'll field this, and James, you can add to it. But speaking of volume of instruments, how are things going with COVID? Has it affected the number of orders, generally speaking? Is demand still relatively strong? And I've got to say, like, we are so blown away and so grateful for everybody's support and interest, of course, in what we're doing and following along. Even when the factory was closed, we're closed for, was it 2.5 months, something like that? Yeah, almost 3 months.
2 months, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're so grateful for that, but we're also so grateful that people are still ordering and buying horns. From that perspective, it hasn't really changed for us, and we recognize that's something that's not consistent across the industry or for any industry. And it makes us feel like we're really doing something right and trying our best to build the best instruments for you as musicians as we can. So no, orders actually haven't slowed down. We've had an uptick recently, which is kind of cool. There was a period of like 7 to 10 days where I had like 8 people reach out about wanting to buy an alto trombone. So I think people were getting really into alto trombone practicing during COVID. So that was
bread and learning alto trombone. Those are the two.
yeah. So, I mean, we definitely see like
bread.
some interesting little trends and stuff like that from COVID. But it's also been really fun to get to see people sharing more practicing videos, since there's only so many creative outlets when you're home and quarantined by yourself. So it's really nice to be able to connect with everybody, those who currently play Shires, those who are thinking about it, those who just recently purchased a Shires. COVID definitely makes us feel like it's strengthened our bond with each other in the factory and also with you guys. But it also makes us just so grateful that we're able to build these incredible instruments and that you guys want them. And look forward to getting your Shires trombone or your Q Series euphonium or whatever it happens to be. So
yeah, and specifically, you know, day to day here at the factory, we, like Sam said, we did have to shut the factory down, completely down for 2 months when Massachusetts basically had a shelter-in-place order imposed. Early on, Massachusetts was one of the harder hit states, kind of early on in the pandemic. It's moved elsewhere, unfortunately, and you know, I think that the strong response here has really helped kind of turn things around, and we were able to reopen the factory in a very limited fashion. In the first phase of reopening here in Massachusetts, we basically brought like 5 people back for the first week and made sure that we had all of the right protocols for social distancing and hygiene and sanitation all in place. And then we kind of very, very carefully brought on another 5 or 6 craftsmen a week until we were back up to our full force. And we're now back up to 100%. Everybody's back to work. We're making instruments. If anything, even a little more efficiently than we were right before the.
which is super interesting.
Yeah, you give everyone a 2-month vacation, and they're ready to get back to work, I think. Tired of looking at their cats in the wall.
That gave us the opportunity, and in a lot of ways, it really is an opportunity to assess and think about what it is that we do. What do we want it to look like? Because now is the only like fresh start that we'll really ever get in this kind of weird, crazy dystopian thing that's happening. So we were able to think about, okay, well, we're going to be here. We're just building instruments for customers. We're not going to be building instruments for Midwest, which was canceled, or ITF, which unfortunately was going to be amazing in Japan this year, and that had to be postponed. But we're going to be building instruments for customers and for dealers, and that's what we're going to do. And how should we do it? How should we focus our time and make any improvements that we want to make? So I feel like we got it dialed in very quickly, and everybody was so flexible and nimble in their adjustment back to this new normal. And for us, it's actually an improved normal. So that's been really cool to see everybody come together in that way.
Yeah, and it's a testament to the craftsmen and men and women here at Shires, that how flexible they were, and had such a good attitude about everything they were going through, and then coming back to work, you know, safely and efficiently and productively, and everyone's had a really great attitude and a really good sort of like team approach to things. It's made it so that we've been able to restart the factory in a way that's even better than I had hoped it would be.
I think it's even better than any of us hoped it would be. Honestly,
Sure.
like,
oh, go ahead, Paul.
Whoever is watching from the shop, like, I can't thank you guys enough. You guys have killed it this past,
oh my gosh,
month and a half.
Amazing.
It's truly amazing that we were shut down for 2 months, and now we're doing as great as we are. And I just feel like we're just going to keep going up.
Yeah, it's pretty special. Again, I just have so many things to talk about that I just get a little bit thrilled. Oh, I was going to say the only thing that hasn't returned to normal is that we're not at this point able to welcome all of our friends and family and colleagues into the showroom to try out instruments. We are anxiously awaiting that moment where we feel like it's safe to do so. And we are working on plans to be able to do that. It might look a little bit different. It might be reduced appointments where we can only allow one tenor trombone player to come in that week so we can allow the instruments to sit in quarantine. It might be, stagger times or whatever it happens to be. But we are very much looking forward to that, and we'll make a big announcement when we feel like that's safe to do. But we are going to start up virtual appointments, and I know it's not quite the same as being in the shop and like actually getting to play one of our euphoniums, one of our trumpets, or one of our trombones. But we have an amazing sales team, and my colleague Alexis will be leading these virtual appointments with like her in the showroom. And if you're a trombone player and you have questions, it's like an opportunity to pick somebody's brain. She's brilliant. She's an amazing player. She's working on her doctorate in trombone performance. It doesn't get much better than Alexis for that kind of stuff, but you can pick her brain about questions. Red brass versus yellow brass. This is what I play. Can you tell me what you would suggest? Can you play it for me? Can I hear you on the Joel S.E model and the Vintage to New York, and that'll help me make my decision about what I should order. It's not the same thing as being able to play it for yourself, but at least we can interact with you, and it'll be a really nice way to do that. And for trumpet and euphonium, I don't think Alexis is going to want to play trumpet for you, but we do have, just a wealth of knowledge about the topic, so we'll be able to help assist you and answer your questions at the very least. I think that's something that will stick around from now on, because it's a great opportunity for somebody who can't make the trip to Massachusetts to be one-on-one with us in the showroom, and also for our international fans and colleagues too. You're not always going to be able to take a flight from Japan, for example, but you can definitely schedule a Zoom call with us, and we can do something from the showroom. And that'll give you a better idea before you contact Roy Brass and order your Shires Colin Williams model. So the virtual appointment thing will be starting up in early August, and that'll be all hosted on our website. So you can do the same thing where you go to the schedule page and schedule a virtual appointment. So stay tuned for more info on that too. But a couple more questions came in really quick. Don was wondering, will Shires be sending Q Series euphoniums to Hawaii? And 100%. That would, of course, and I think we may have even sent some already, but you can chat with Music Center of Hawaii, and also go to our website, and I'll link it, www.etseshires.com/dealers. And it's a handy dandy new dealer locator where you can pop in your zip code or country or town or street or whatever and see who's closest to you. I would always encourage you to reach out to the dealer and let them know what you're interested in. If they don't have it in stock, they're going to get in touch with us, and we're going to do our best to try to get something out to them so that you can try it or purchase it. Yay, I'm glad you were happy about that. That's great. And then Paul was wondering, and maybe you guys can address this. He'd love to hear your opinions on what sets a well-made instrument apart from a less well-made instrument. So what tendencies and what qualities do really high-level handmade instruments have compared to something where it's not as great, maybe?
I feel like it's definitely got something to do, kind of what we touched on when we were going through the building process. Yeah, we build stuff efficiently and rather quickly, but we're not going to rush through stuff. Like, we're not going to quench stuff so we can move it on to the next process faster. It's kind of like that little bit of attention to detail that just really kind of takes it to that next level, which is definitely a big standpoint for handmade instruments, in my opinion, personally.
What else do you guys think?
A couple things I can think of. One thing James touched on when he was talking about lacquering and like thickness of lacquer and how thick of a layer we're laying down. I mean, there's a lot of instruments you can even like see how thick the lacquer is, and it has like a dead sound to it. So just that alone.
And that's also a hallmark of student or intermediate instruments moving
Right.
up. Well, there tends to be quite a bit more lacquer on the beginning instruments, and for good reason, to protect the horn maybe from someone who's not so used to handling something that's as delicate. And so, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to have thicker lacquer on something like that. But as you move up to professional, your focus should be more oriented towards the performing aspects of the instrument, and the resonance and the sound and the playability. And that's where a little bit of less lacquer really comes into play.
Yeah, and sorry to elaborate on that even more. It's even more than just the thickness of lacquer. You know, intermediate student instruments are designed intentionally to be more robust. They have rougher lives. When you move past that level of instrument into, artist quality, handmade professional instruments, they get a lot lighter. They get more delicate. There's tighter tolerances. If you drop your student trumpet on the parking lot, the marching band parking lot, it may still work when you pick it up. You drop a Shires trumpet wrong, the valves aren't going to move because they're fit tightly, and there isn't that extra slop that's built in to absorb dents. They don't have crumple zones the way cars do, unfortunately. So that's one of the things. They're made very carefully, and related to that, we expect our customers to also treat them very carefully as well. Please.
Oiling your valves is always a good thing. We always say that valve oil is cheap. Instruments are way more expensive. So if you're properly maintaining your instrument, it's gonna
Oil your valves.
oil your valves, clean your horn. Now is a great time to be able to do that. But
if you don't have oil, we include oil with the purchase of every Shires instrument. So you could always buy a new Shires instrument and it will have oil in it too.
Yeah. But it is super handy, and if you do have questions about maintenance, you can go to our website, and I'll link it here. But www.seshires.com/FAQ, and I had put up there like some maintenance tips and stuff for each instrument. Another thing that sets higher level instruments apart is also design, making really carefully constructed decisions about what we're expecting an instrument to do, what the player wants it to do, and how to achieve that in the most elegant way. So even with, and James, maybe you could touch on this, like for the euphonium, I mean, you spent hours changing the brace design for aesthetic reasons, but also for sound and response and resonance reasons. Like that was a huge project. Yeah. It's something that you might not even think about making such a big impact.
Yeah, and we also did the same thing with the new Joel S.E model tenor trombone. It's if you look at our website, you'll see pictures of it. It looks different than other, obviously different than other valve sections in particular that we've made before. And one of the things that we were really finding tuning with Mr. Leslie was getting it to respond exactly as he needed it to. And you can do a lot with tapers and materials, but the way the instrument is braced and assembled, the way that the tubes are overlapping or not overlapping with each other makes a lot of difference. And it's one of the things that, because here at Shires, we're all band geeks at the end, and we've all, built our own Shires trombones, after hours, and done a lot of these experiments on our own. And we because of that, have a really good understanding of exactly what changing these braces do. I know for a fact that if you take this brace off, the horn's going to play more open. I know that because I did it to my own horn. I also know what happens when you don't like it and you need to put it back on. I've done that too. So those kinds of things, it's fun for us to learn exactly what makes these horns really, really work. And then when you get to work with someone, like Joel S.E, like Colin Williams, like Blair Bollinger, right? These are guys that are playing trombone on a level that it's a different plane, right? And they are able to input, give the instruments an input that, someone like myself, who I hope I play well, but I am not Joel S.E, right? So it allows us to really understand what the instrument is doing under the most extreme circumstances. I like to equate it to like, Ferrari, right? They make great road cars. The reason they make great road cars is because they make race cars for people that really know how to drive cars. Not so much right now if you're watching Formula One, but anyway. But it's the same sort of idea, right? You have a race car driver, driving the wheels off the car, and if it holds together, when you buy that car and you drive it to the grocery store, it's going to be great, and that's one of the reasons why we do work with all these really amazing artists, because they're able to put things into the instruments that most mortals aren't able to. And if we can make a horn that will hold up to that and perform at that high a level, it's going to be amazing for the rest of us.
that also kind of goes into the way that we decide on models also. There are so, especially on trombone, because there are just so many options with all of the alloys and the bell weights and the bead wires and the construction types and the whole gamut. There's, I don't know how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of options that there would be if you were to really like do all the factorial stuff. But what we find is that there are typical pairings that work really well together. Over time, it's tested and true. And for most people, the standard models that like you'll see on our website, or in a normal world you would try at Midwest or NAM or ITF or ITG or something, those represent some of the most popular components that work for a player who's looking for something like this. You can always make modifications. That's why we do like the 3 lead pipes, so you can tailor it to you. That's why for trumpets, we have so many different like slightly modified A bells. So you could do the A, the AZ, the AZS8, the AF, the AHW. Like there are so many things that you can choose from. But at the end of the day, we spend so much time thinking about what your experience is going to be with the instrument. And so we feel like, hopefully after 25 years, you can trust us when we say, this is the vintage New York model. This is what we think is like, in our mind, the best approximation of a vintage like Mount Vernon, New York trombone. This is the Joe Alessi model. This is what Joe wants, and this is what Joe plays on. This is the George Curran model, and this is what we worked on with George, and this is literally what he's currently playing on. So that ability to put some stuff together, and it's kind of like for any of us wine or beer enthusiasts, it's kind of like a pairing of wines or a pairing of beer flights or whatever. Like it makes sense as you keep adding on additional components. For those of us who are old enough to drink, I should say. But but yeah, man. Is there anything else that you guys want to touch on really quick before we end this for tonight? But maybe we'll do this again because this was awesome. Anybody got anything? No?
I
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
We'll talk, guys.
Yeah, it was nice to do this for sure. Hopefully the next time that we do this, we can we'll be bringing more like virtual content in general from now on. Maybe not always at 8 p.m. It might be during the day, and we'll start up some more of our like craftswomen spotlight series, where we can like get to see more of what our team is doing in the shop, like right live from the bench. So as we continue down this new normal, we'll be bringing that to you. But yeah, this was definitely a lot of fun. I think we covered a lot of ground. Paul, yeah, you're right. We do brew our own beer. That's a pretty fun thing, by the way. The Shires,
not in-house, but
not in-house. We go to a place in like Natick, Massachusetts, and you can go and brew and bottle, and we have all these like fun labels. We usually do them for like special events. So we did like a Shires Hopdale IPA because our town was Hopedale. We've done a Holidays because it was like Christmas time and Holliston is our town. And then we did the Alessi Ale, and that was like pretty rad and a lot of fun too. But yeah, we'll keep more content coming out. I hope you guys will keep tuning in. We have some more ShiresTV episodes that are gearing up soon. Next week is going to be a really awesome panel with Brad Palmer and Colin Williams and George Curran and I think Nick Sugonk and the team behind Southeast Trombone Symposium. We're going to talk about what STS is like, how it got started, what it's like to do some of these like massive undertakings of excerpt like quartetti things that they do and the whole thing. So that'll be a really fun one. We're going to have an orchestral trombone panel coming up soon, and we'll just keep some more content coming to you guys because it seems like everybody's enjoying it. But for now, I think we'll say goodnight. And thanks for watching, and thanks to my esteemed colleagues who are both on screen and also in the shop every day building and doing amazing work. So
Great, guys.
yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. And if you have any other questions, you can always email us, info@seshires.com. Feel free to like, share this, comment on this. We'll try to get back to you. But thanks and happy practicing, and keep on keeping on, everybody.
Stay safe. Safe and healthy.
Wear a mask.
Very nice. All right, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you guys soon. All right. Bye-bye.